Greetings, brave adventurers! My name is FoxyBard, and today I have part 1 of a rather interesting story for you. It once again involves a vampire LARP. Vampire LARPs tend to have some of the strangest stories come out of them. Now, part 1 is fairly tame, and it may seem like nothing bad is really happening. But we're just setting the scene, and part 2 on Friday is going to carry a lot of weight with it. To put it as lightly as I can, I still haven't decided exactly how many trigger warnings I need to include before it, so be ready for that. But today's story isn't bad, so grab yourself a seat around the fire as we dig into part 1 of this tale of role-playing. Today's story comes to us from the user La Petite Morte, and it is entitled, I Swear I'm Not Really a Vampire, I Just Play One on the Weekends, Part 1. It does a good job of setting the scene, and then on Friday, the fox really hits the fan. But let's get into it. Tale start. I'm a wordy girl, so this is a long read. Honestly, a really long read. So I split it into 2 parts. You have been warned. Full disclosure, I did type this up and submit it to the Let's Not Meet podcast about a year ago, but as of yet it hasn't been selected for reading. I cross-posted this to RedX, so if anyone does choose to read this out, please let me know so I can listen. I know I can meander a bit, so if there are any misspellings, grammar mistakes, or spacing issues, please let me know so I can fix them. Thanks in advance! Hello, fellow lovers of all things geeky and creative! I've been confined to my bedroom for the past year and a half due to a surgical mishap with my lower spine, so I've spent a lot of time finishing long-abandoned projects, developing new crafting obsessions, miniature building and diamond painting anyone, and listening to stories on YouTube. Content creators such as RedX, CritCrab, FoxyBard, hey, that's me! Crispy's Tavern, Crow's Perch, Den of the Drake, and many more have kept me company throughout the long days and lonely nights of the past year. Oh, I'm glad we could be there for you. In return for the welcome laughter, exasperated sighs, and occasional tears, I'd like to offer a tale of LARPing and mistaken identity. Names are fake to protect the mentally ill. After a series of traumatic life events left me with the desire to move somewhere that held no memories or people that knew me, I, F21 at the time of this story, moved to Miami in 1994. I bounced from studio to apartment, worked as an exotic dancer at various bars, and started going to the local goth club every weekend night I wasn't working. Ooh, an exotic dancer goth. I like you already. The place was called the Kitchen Club, short for Hell's Kitchen, and at the time was located in the warehouse space of the post office in the Coconut Grove area of Miami. This club, and by extension the Grove itself, became the center of my world. The first real friends I made in Miami, I met on the dance floor and at the bar. They didn't ask about my past, didn't care that I worked as a stripper, treated me the same whether I was wearing high Victorian goth or jeans and a tank top. I played pool, danced my butt off, and genuinely felt like I had a real home for the first time. Back in my old town, I'd been heavily involved in the local Vampire the Masquerade LARP, live action roleplay, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, except you dress up as your character and walk around interacting with other players, using rock, paper, scissors instead of dice throws. So when I discovered that there was a 50-person strong, bi-weekly Saturday night game going on at the kitchen, I jumped in with both feet. For any White Wolf geeks out there, I played a Romani Mulcavian until the Ravnos clan was added. Then I ran my character as Ravnos for the next 5 years. The LARP was a one world by night game, So we had people playing vampires, werewolves, mages, changelings, which are fairies, and wraiths, which are ghosts. Essentially every creature that White Wolf had a TTRPG for. I actually have the old Changeling the Dreaming and Mage the Ascension books. I need to really read through them again. They're really cool. In 1996, I finally moved to Coconut Grove, into a tiny cottage on a property called Through the Looking Glass. It was owned by an old hippie that made stained glass and who was obsessed with Alice in Wonderland. I loved living there. My cottage was Mad Hatter's Tea Party themed and had gorgeous stained glass windows in every room. My favorite window was in the back door. It was the table set with teapots and teacups, with a small dormouse asleep in one pot. The door itself couldn't be opened fully. It was stopped by the property fence line before the halfway point. There was a tiny concrete pad between the house and the fence, and the space along the fence was overgrown with lilac and ivy. There wasn't enough space for anyone to get back there without going through the house. Not entirely relevant to the story, but it was an amazing, beautiful, magical place, and it's a tragedy that it no longer exists. Wow, yeah, that sounds incredible. I would love to live somewhere like that. I eventually found a job working at a jewelry cart in Coconut Grove proper. I worked for a pair of aging hippies, not related to my landlord in any way, who sold handmade jewelry to tourists. It was a fairly easygoing job. I sold lots of puka shell bracelets, necklaces, hair jewelry, Rasta-themed items, a metric crap ton of plastic eyes set into pewter rings, and pendants. Green and blue eyes always sold out fast. And woven bracelets that I made using the tried and true friendship bracelet knotting method, while waiting for tourists to stop and browse our wares. Depending on the time of year and our assigned location for the month, we would be open between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. and close anywhere from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Ooh, yeah, gotta get the 1:30 in the morning drunks coming back from the bar who really want to get all those pretty necklaces they saw on their way over. Since the kitchen opened at midnight and closed at 6 a.m., I would often get off work, run 3 blocks home to change, and then go out to dance, drink, and LARP until club close. On LARP nights, if I was still at work after the club opened, the game masters, GMs, would send someone to my cart to tell me what was happening and get my responses or actions to anything that included me. If it was something particularly complicated that couldn't be postponed until I was off work, one of the 3 GMs would bring any other players that were involved to me, and we'd roleplay, RP, out the scenes in between my customers. Oh, that's really nice of them. That's super cool. I love it when GMs are willing to go the extra mile. It was during one of these nights that I met Alejandro. He looked like a typical Grove rat, having drifted into the Grove a few months prior and joined the skater-stoner crowd. I'd run into him a few times during the week or at the rainbow picnics on Sundays, but I'd never really talked to him. I guess he'd noticed the people with fangs that would sometimes visit me at work. One night, after a particularly intense RP session, Alejandro came up to me after the players headed back to the club. They had gotten ice cream from the Miami Subs across the street, dropped off a surprise cone for me, then formed a conga line and happily congaed the 2 blocks back to the kitchen. Aside, I genuinely wish I'd had a video camera then. The sight of 5 goths, ice cream cones in hand, doing the most unrhythmic conga ever, punctuated with dun 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 rar, dun 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 hiss, is one of my favorite memories to date, and never fails to make me smile. That does sound like kind of a riot. Alejandro sidled up to my cart and vaguely browsed the cases of chains I was positive he couldn't afford, given all the times he tried to bum money off of me. I kept an eye on him while I ate my ice cream, until he dropped the pretense and asked me, "What was all that about?" I spent the next hour or so explaining LARPing, the vampire game, how the mechanics of play worked, what the kitchen club was like, etc. I didn't know it at the time, but that was my first mistake. I invited him to check out the club the next night he was free, which I already knew was all of them, and could afford to pay his own cover and drinks. He said he'd been intimidated by how the regulars looked, but would definitely take me up on my invite. Mistake number 2. He showed up at the cart 2 weeks later and asked if he could tag along to the club. I told him the game was going on, so I didn't know how much time I would be able to spare to hang out with him, but if he was cool with that, then I had no problem with him joining me. Alejandro replied that he'd be fine people watching, and mentioned that he was interested in the game. I said that he should lurk for a few games to see if he could follow the story, and liked the intrigue. After that, if he thought he could handle it, I'd help him create a character. Huge mistake number 3. He came to the kitchen club with me for the next 3 game nights, then asked me to help him with his character. He was a bit of an odd man out at first, initially wearing tie-dye t-shirts and ripped jean shorts, but over the following months he changed drastically. He started dressing like his bourgeois, biker, artist character all the time, introduced himself by his LARP name, Alejandro, and told people he was a 300-year-old vampire from Brazil, and almost lost his warehouse job because he started insisting he couldn't go out during the day because he was allergic to the sun. It got to the point that the 3 GMs ordered him to take a 2-game break, equal to a month, to ground himself into reality because he was worrying them with how delusional he was acting. This wasn't an unusual tactic for the GMs to enact if they thought someone was losing sight of reality, but luckily it didn't happen often. Most of the time, the person would take their time out with ill grace at the beginning, but usually come back after a few weeks admitting that it had been necessary, and promising to remember that they were human beings playing a game. This time out was mistake number 4, and the catalyst for the obsessive insanity to come. Alejandro disappeared not only from the game, but from the Grove entirely. After 2 weeks, I got worried and called him, but he never picked up or returned any of the messages I left on his answering machine. I had a vague idea of where he lived, but not enough to find his house and check on him. The GMs didn't think his extended absence was a bad thing. They took it as a sign that they had stepped in at the right time and that he'd return, or not, on his own when he was ready. I pushed my worry to the back of my mind, agreed that he'd eventually turn up, hopefully as a human, and went on with my pleasant routine of work, clubbing, books, coffee, and sunshine. Now that actually sounds like a pretty ideal life. Except for the clubbing part, I'm not big on that. 2 other things contributed to the coming weirdness. Those being my character's backstory, and a scar that was on the right side of my chest, 2 inches below my collarbone. My Ravnos' history was that she had been turned into a vampire by another Ravnos 300 years prior in Moravia because he thought she was especially clever for her 25 years and thought that letting such a grand liar and thief like her die would be a shame. She eventually immigrated to New Orleans by way of France during the Great War, and then had fled Nola for Miami after having a disagreement with the Prince of Nola over feeding rights. In reality, while I had been to Europe as a teen and focused on missionary trips, I had never once set foot in France or Nola. I believe Nola is New Orleans. I think. I don't know. Second, I'm allergic to both gold and titanium. The purer the metal, the worse the reaction. If I have prolonged contact with either, I will develop awful weeping blisters that can last for days and eventually heal into scars. A coworker crashed at my place because she was too drunk to drive home, and ended up passing out in my bed. Unbeknownst to me, she was wearing a 2-inch long, 24-karat tri-gold crucifix. I woke up the next afternoon with a terrible pain on my chest, and discovered that her necklace had gotten pinned between my shoulder and the bed while we were asleep. A few weeks later, I had a crucifix-shaped scar, something my friends thought was hilarious and teased me about. I worked it into my vampire's backstory, which led to a lot of people thinking it was FX makeup. That belief was fine by me, as it saved me from having to explain my allergy. Since this was Miami, my Helsing scar was unusually visible due to the tank tops I habitually wore. Okay, but having a crucifix-shaped scar on your chest, that is hardcore goth. I love that. 5 weeks passed with no word or sight of Alejandro, and I'll admit I'd sort of forgotten about him. Out of sight, out of mind, you know? I was initially happy when I saw him coming through the crowds of tourists that Saturday night. He was dressed up in his LARP clothes, so I assumed he was coming to hang out with me for an hour until the kitchen club opened. The booth was blessedly empty of customers, even though it had been an extremely busy night so far, so I set down my dinner and hopped off my stool to give him a hug. I was smiling until I saw the crazy and enraged look in his eyes. I thought maybe he was mad I hadn't tried harder to check on him. And as I opened my mouth to apologize, all hell broke loose. I'll leave the tale there for the time being, as it's gotten long enough, and I'll post part 2 tomorrow. And I, Foxy, will tell that on Friday for you all. In the meantime, thank you very much if you've read this far. What do you think is about to happen? Leave your guess in the comments. That goes for you too, YouTube viewers. Leave your guess as what's about to happen in the comments section. I hope you're having a glorious day and that all of your dice are rolling in your favor. And tail end. So, what do you think is going to happen? Obviously, I know I've read part 2 of this story, and it goes places. I'm not going to spoil anything. You'll have to wait until Friday to find out for sure. Just know that Friday's story is pretty rough. I'm going to have to include just so many trigger warnings on that story. There's a lot. What is it with LARPs and inspiring just the weirdest things? Ugh. Honestly though, OP, I feel like you and I would be friends if we met. You seem really awesome, honestly. And I would love to hang out and talk about vampires and stuff with you sometime. Plus, also, you mentioned me by name in your post, and that makes me happy. I like it when people know that I'm here and doing stuff. Anyway, this is the part where I'm going to tell you the same thing that I say very often. Don't ignore red flags if you see them, and learn to recognize red flags so you can pick up on them sooner. Honestly, that is one of the reasons that I continue to make videos like this, so that people can recognize these sort of traits and behaviors before they become a problem and address them early. Because the thing is, as much as telling these horror stories helps pay the bills, I don't want all of my viewers and listeners to subject themselves to horror stories on my behalf. Please do everything you can to avoid horror stories. Force me to shift my content because all the horror stories dried up. That would be ideal. Thanks for listening, as always. And that is it for Foxy today. Don't forget to like the video if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so, ring the bell notification icon and select all notifications if you would like to be notified every time I upload a new video, and leave me your comments and what you expect to happen in part 2 in the comments section below. You can also join the FoxyBard Discord at discord.gg/FoxyBard, and you can find me on Twitter at thatFoxyBard. And of course, huge shout out and thank you to all of my supporters over on patreon.com/FoxyBard. You guys are my best friends in the world, and that's no lie. Do you want to also be one of my best friends in the world? Head on over to patreon.com/FoxyBard and sign up for as little as $3 a month. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me keep doing this. But for now, I need to steel myself for preparing for Friday's video. Whew, gonna need that. So, let's douse the fire and get back to our own adventures.